The United States is in crisis.
Our freedoms are under attack. Our rights are in jeopardy.
And that's why your vote this November counts.
As secular humanists who care about our fellow citizens, we have a duty
to be engaged, even when it's heartbreaking to turn on the news.
To educate ourselves and each other, even when it takes time and energy.
To make sure our voices are heard in conversation with family members, in productive online discussion, and at the ballot box.
You don't need a platform to make a difference.
You don't need a YouTube channel to make your voice heard.
You don't need subscribers to change minds.
You don't need to go into college debt to educate yourself.
You don't need to run for office to be a force for political change.
All you need to do is vote.
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 All you need to do is vote.
Just go to usa.gov/confirm voter registration to see if you're registered.
To register, go to www.vote.gov.
It's a simple thing, but it's simple things that take the most courage and make the biggest difference.
We don't care why you vote.
You can vote because it's the ethical thing to do.
You can vote because you're fed up and angry.
You can vote to give us time to staunch the wound and begin the healing process.
You can vote because you want to take a selfie with your I voted sticker.
Just vote.
Long time no see, man.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I mean, on the show.
Well, I mean, I see you every day.
Let's go.
Run.
Welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is October 11th, 2020. It is season 4, episode 41. I'm Eric Murphy.
And I'm Thomas Westbrook.
Dude, how's it going, man?
Fantastic.
I'm happy to have you on. So for people who are watching who don't know who this guy is and they're going, why are they not social distancing? Turns out my roommate is another YouTuber.
We live together.
Yeah, we do. What's your channel? If people don't know you, who the hell are you?
I'm a full-time YouTuber. I make a show called Holiest of Koolaids where I do animated content and I talk about science and I teach people about critical thinking and skepticism. And I try to do it in a laser-focused way. I try to keep them like under 10 minutes, but sometimes it stretches longer. But I really, really try to go hard on research and get things right and figure out why things are the way that they are and how we can know what we know.
Absolutely. So I've seen you put hundreds of hours into the videos that you do. And a lot of your videos are things that I've pushed out. Like when the coronavirus was first starting, you did that interview with, what was his name?
Dr. Paul Offit.
Yeah, just talking about viruses. When people want to talk about psychics and that, I point them towards your series on that. So I think what you do is really, really beneficial, and I'm proud to have you on and proud to be your friend, man. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
it's good to be on.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple of announcements before we dive into calls. But if you do want to call, you can and you should, because we've got room for callers and we want to talk to you. So the number is 512-991-9242. I'll say that again, 512-991-9242. Or you can go tiny.cc/callth. Again, that's tiny.cc/callth. We've had more theist callers waiting until about halfway through the show, and then the entire line fills up, and then we don't have time to talk to everybody. And so if they call in, then we can prioritize calls and we can get those all sorted out. So that helps. This show, Talk Heathen, is a product of the atheist community of Austin. Yes, it is happening currently out of my house, but we have volunteers all over the place, all over the country, who are running the video, running the audio, who are screening the calls, and who are clipping and making the thumbnails and all of that for the show. it is a collaborative effort, and we are doing it for the ACA. It's a nonprofit. If you want to support us, consider going to patreon.com/talkheathen-to-me. That's patreon.com/talkheathen-to-me, where we thank the top 5 patrons every week, 2/3 of the way through the episode. And I do have it up and I do refresh it. So if you want to hear your name called today, go to patreon.com/talkheathen-to-me. There are other things actually that are really, really cool. So first off, this show has been approved to be all live chats and fundraisers, that kind of stuff. The ACA gets 100% of the donation because it's a nonprofit.
Nice.
So if people wanted to donate through the live chat, if they wanted to become a member, in YouTube, and also,
you lucky dogs, YouTube takes its cut from me.
Oh yeah.
But that's awesome because then people know that like their money's actually going where they're putting it. And it's not being pilfered off by YouTube or something.
Exactly. And there's another day coming up soon, and that is Amazon Prime Day. And because the ACA is a nonprofit, you can actually choose for a section, for a portion of all of your purchases on Amazon to go to the atheist community of Austin. So 13th and 14th is when that happens, but please do it now. Hop in, go to smile.amazon.com, and you can select the atheist community of Austin to be the recipient of that portion. And again, it helps. It's a passive way to support the organization. So
I love using Amazon Smile because what it basically does is it doesn't actually charge you anymore for the items that you're purchasing, but a small percentage of the profit that would normally go to Amazon instead goes to your favorite charity.
Exactly. So there's that. Let's see. Have we shilled enough? I'm pretty sure
Let's get to some calls.
Let's get to some calls. I want to first dive in. Let's talk to Itto in Arkansas. Itto, you're live with Eric and Thomas.
Hey.
Hey, what would you like to talk about?
Hi, Alman. How are you?
We're doing well. What do you want to talk about today?
I would like to talk about a suffering as it's not a cause to someone losing their faith. It's not a good reason. Mm-hmm.
I agree.
We agree.
Yeah. So I am an atheist and I am totally blind and I went through a lot. So actually, while I was suffering, God was like an oxycodone for me. I was religious, but at the same time, I was kind of researching and trying to find first, is the God thing real or not? And when I discovered that there is thousands of religions, I wanted to know which one of them is true. And that was the real suffering, the moment itself. So now, I don't know. I don't have the answer to why religious people, even though some of them who are too hard on me, like when I say, well, we're not going to be friends anymore. They don't want to be out of my life. They want to be around me so bad to like, I don't know. Is it because I sound an interesting creature who could benefit the religion ideology, or is it because of my disability? Just last week, I ended up blocking someone who would say, I love you. And I'm like, I don't believe that. I'm very straightforward. So
this is someone that I take it you don't know very well.
No, I know them very well. That is the problem. So, and she said, you are sad and I want to make you happy. And I'm like, how do you know that I am sad? Well, because you don't believe in God. Why? Because you're suffering. Well, no, that's not true. So
there's that whole idea of, there's that whole idea of the God-shaped hole in your heart. And in fact, there are so many pieces to that. How terribly pernicious is it that when people find others in need or in crisis, that's the time that they leap in and want to proselytize. And the love piece, actually, I've got to tell you, I was on a Christian podcast yesterday, and the Christian I was talking to believes that he can miraculously heal others with the power of his mind, and he told me that he loved me unconditionally. And I thought, what a way to denigrate the word love. You don't know me, and it does not demonstrate love. It's not showing love.
Well, there's kind of a tactic that a lot of cult leaders will use called love bombing. And it's where let's say that you are going through pain or suffering or depression or anything like that, and all of a sudden here's this person who's coming up who's just being extremely overwhelmingly nice, and they don't know you, they don't have any reason to be nice to you, but they're just showering you in love and being like, look at how wonderful and loving our group is. And so it's really easy when you see something like that to be like, oh, this looks amazing, I feel so good around these people. But it can often be a tactic used to grow numbers, and it's not genuine love, because it can't be. Genuine love is something that's formed over time. It's formed through relationships, through interactions with other people, through building trust, and it takes time to build up. And when someone uses a tactic like that, it's natural to have your guard go up a little bit and be like, what is it that they want out of me? Is it a spiritual reward where they genuinely think that they're going to get some reward in heaven, and so they have to go out and win people over by any means necessary? Is it something that they're just emulating because they've seen other people do it, and they're like, oh, that must be what we're supposed to do? Either way, it's not real love.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I am a multilingual, and I speak 7 languages. And I did, in grad school, take a class. I took a class on moral emotions, and I did research on guilt and shame across cultures and languages, and that actually applies to love. There are some languages that don't have the word for that, and I don't actually believe in anything like that. I believe, like, if someone is good, they're good. If they're not, they're not. Using those words without purposelessly, it's like pouring water into a big pile of small rocks. It wouldn't absorb it. It's just like, that's literally what's happening to me. But the main reason that I called is like, how would I represent myself without like being outraged or getting angry at someone who would come to me and try to speak for me, speak for my emotions, to manipulate me? Of course, that will never happen, because I come to this conclusion not just through education, not through anything.
I think that whole idea that would never happen. I would push back on that because it is very, very easy to be taken in. There are a lot of small little tools that groups like that use to wrangle people in. And I think that to say, well, that would never happen to me. It happens to a lot of people. And I think it helps to have a clear understanding of where that comes from and why that's getting used. And most importantly, that it's not necessarily being used in a malicious way by the person who's reaching out to you. If you've been taught that you have a special power, a special ability, that you live in a world that you are somehow the hero of, then you're going to address things in those terms. And that is really the way, at least in my church, and I know in yours as well, that there's this idea of the fallen world, and that you're supposed to go out and you're supposed to be rescuing these people. And so the idea that they would somehow try and intentionally want to manipulate you, I think there's a correlation there. I think people are taught to dive in when they're seeing someone vulnerable, but it's not necessarily always, a malicious thing.
I think what I gathered from what you were saying is that you're saying that you're not going to be brought back to Christianity, or you're not going to be brought back into the fold because you've already figured out through other methods that it's...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There is no way, unless I lose my mind or something. But it would be a shock to myself first but there's no way, because it's not, I am not even doubting. Like, for example, some people would say, oh, I'm not sure if there is no God or not. That they're still doubting. For me, I'm sure that there's, so I'm very strong atheist. There is no way.
I'm kind of the same way in that, like, maybe someone could convince me with enough evidence that there was some first cause, with our universe specifically, that was some, hyper advanced alien civilization. Like maybe I could believe something like that easily with evidence. But as far as like the gods of the Bible, or specifically the Bible, just the stories in it and stuff, the more that I study and the more that I research, I'm like, this doesn't match up with everything that we know about the world. So I'm on the same page with you there. As far as dealing with these situations without feeling like you're coming off as a dick, I 100% relate to you because, after I left the faith, for me, I left over the course of like 3, 4, 5 years, but my family didn't see that journey. They didn't see that progress. They didn't see the progression. They just saw all of a sudden I'm an atheist. And about the same time that they learned about it was about the same time I was going through a divorce. So they're like, oh, he must just be hurting and he's angry at God. And I'm like, no, that's not it at all. Yeah. It's not it at all. Mm-hmm. But then they're like, well, maybe if we show him love and, show him the love of Jesus and stuff like that, then that'll bring him back. And not just with my family, but people who didn't really know me. It's like, if they're like, hey, look, we love you unconditionally, come back into the fold. How do I say I don't appreciate those tactics without seeming like someone who's just callous and just being a jerk and being like, you're saying I love you and I'm saying, go screw yourself.
You don't. Simply you don't, literally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
someone says I love you, I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Itto. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, in some cases, like with my parents, like they genuinely do love me, and some, with my family and stuff too. But sometimes you can tell that they're using it as a way to try to bring you back into the fold. And in those situations, it's like it doesn't feel like real love. It doesn't feel like 100%, unconditional or whatever. Not that love has to be. There's different types of love, but it feels tainted. It feels like there's a quote by Seth Andrews where he says it feels like the real love is being reserved and they're just schmoozing you like a politician who wants your vote. And that it can have that feeling. So it's like, how do you navigate that situation? I don't have an easy answer for you. I think it's situational. Sometimes the person doesn't love you and you can be like, you don't really know me. Like, you can't say that because that's not real love, and call them out on it. And if it's someone who does love you, then say, if you love me, then stop trying to change my mind. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Mm-hmm.
I honestly think that's also an internalization of a Christian narrative that has been pushed for a really, really long time. I think it was Tolkien who wrote a book about the 4 different kinds of love, and how you have that agape, unconditional love is something that you reference, and it's something that is just so steeped in a Christian culture that it's really, really hard to get rid of.
Well, but it goes back further than that. It goes back to the ancient Greek roots.
That's where he tied that and pulled that. But I think that the popularization of that definitely is a lot more recent. But that said, Itto, thank you for calling in. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. And actually, I am. It's my first time to be introduced to the love concept because I'm an ex-Muslim. So in Islam, it's all about fear. You have to worship or you'll burn in hell. That's all. They didn't say there was no love. There's just hell.
Mm-hmm. I would love for more Muslims to call in so we can talk to them, and hopefully that time will come. But until then, take it easy. Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
So before we dive into the next call, there are a couple of things. Number one, in the live chat, people are looking at your COVID beard and wondering if you're really Thomas Westbrook or if you're the evil version of him that's just kind of sitting in.
The moderators were saying that I look like Rasputin, but I think that his beard was longer and his hair was straight. So I would have to straighten my hair, which Hannah actually, my girlfriend actually straightened my hair and your hair last week.
Yeah, that's why I came on looking like.
Maybe next time I'll leave my beard all scraggly and I'll have straight hair, and I'll hold a painting of Rasputin up next to me for comparison.
It actually looks super, super weird. People thought that I had a wig on or that I didn't actually have long hair. But anyway, so one other thing. Oh my gosh, I feel really silly about this. People are asking, where's V? V is watching their sister's wedding right now. Their sister's getting married, and because of COVID, V is not able to be there to actually celebrate in person, but is there digitally and watching that wedding live. V, take care. And I'm glad you get to see that, and I'm glad you get to be there to support your family. So we love you. All right, you ready to dive into the next call?
First, I just want to say thank you, Scott Miller, in the chat for saying I look more like Cumberbatch than Rasputin. I will take that compliment, and I will take it to heart. Now let's go to the next caller. It's my celebrity doppelganger. I'm gonna hold on to it. It's a lot better than when I was a kid. I got Napoleon Dynamite, and like I will take Benedict Cumberbatch over Napoleon Dynamite any day of the week.
Okay, Benedict.
Any day of the week.
Christian, in Wisconsin, you're live with Eric and Thomas. What would you like to talk about?
You both are killing me, you two. I would say Doctor Strange is a good comparison for Thomas there.
I would say Strange, but that's because he's my roommate and I get to rib him.
Although he's of all of the superheroes, in terms of personality and beliefs and stuff, he's a little bit too woo. Like I feel like I should be Iron Man. Like because he goes into the whole, you gotta like tap into this weird,
but it's
new
real.
age. It is real.
They're like, here's a ring, go like this, wax on, wax off, and you can make a portal.
And it works.
Yeah, like you could
That's
test
true.
it.
That's true. Because he was a skeptic until he tried it and then he believed it. And so he's still a skeptic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing.
I'll take that.
In Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of people think, well, I would play an atheist in D&D as well. And it's like, why? There are actually
There's
gods.
actual magic.
Yeah.
It's like if there's actual evidence of it, then I'm not going to be closed-minded. I'm going to go with it. I'll take that. I'll take that.
Why are we? Why? What did you do to us, Christian? Why are we on this? What did you want to call in about?
I was going to talk about Thomas's video, but honestly, the conversation about Dungeons and Dragons is far more interesting than anything I could bring.
Well, as long as it stays topical to Talk Heathen.
Actually, the topic that you wanted to call in about is something that I really, really enjoyed watching Thomas do on the back end. And that is, I'm just going to read what the note is here. It says that you want to talk about Thomas's video on the perception that atheism is the downfall of nations. You spent months on this.
I spent a while.
A little while. I've seen. I saw you pull a lot of super long nights putting together this extensive database, this huge spreadsheet of information. Do you want to talk about what that is?
Yeah, why don't I, for the viewers, real quick summarize what I did. My background is in international studies and political science, and I've spent a lot of time, I've traveled a lot. I've spent more of my life overseas than in the US. And I've also spent a lot of time kind of buried in data sets and looking at, certain metrics or measurements of development and success and stuff. And so when I'm presented by theists with this notion that atheism is the downfall of nations. If you become secular, or if your nation becomes secular, then God is going to curse you. It's similar to how Pat Robertson will say something like, oh, the reason that there's a hurricane in New Orleans is because of all the gay people. And it's like, really? Gay people can summon hurricanes? Like, I want to have those superpowers. I'm just going to, butt fiddle my way to Narnia and level up so I can just summon down hurricanes wherever I want. Like, that sounds amazing. But unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way. And so
if nobody clips you saying butt fiddle my way to Narnia, I will do it personally. Go ahead.
So what I wanted to showcase is that atheism doesn't summon thunderbolts. It doesn't. Your country doesn't go into disrepair, and it doesn't become cursed just because you're an atheist. And the way that I wanted to present that was I wanted to look at 10 different metrics of success and development, things like, GDP per capita, the Gini coefficient, which is income inequality, how well is the income distributed? Is it all just in the hands of the very wealthy few at the top? And then, and I also looked at things like infant mortality rate and homicide rate, to measure violent crime and stuff like that. And what I found was that there was a really, really, really big disconnect between the non-religious countries fared really well on all of these metrics, and the religious countries, the most religious countries didn't fare so well. And some people were popping in and saying, oh, well, yeah, but that's because these countries are more democratic and these countries are less democratic, and they're finding all these other factors. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly my point. There are a million other factors that influence this so much more than whether or not they believe in God. And if God was able to just miraculously cause a country to be cursed because it didn't believe in him, then he's doing it in the most ineffective way imaginable. And it's clearly not the most important factor, if it's a factor at all, because the correlation is going strongly in the opposite direction. So, yeah.
Cheers.
So what was it that you wanted to, now that I've kind of given a summary of what the research was that...
Yeah, I had a conversation with a religious friend of mine who made an interesting point kind of under the umbrella of the video you had made. And I actually shared with him the video that you had made out of interest in the topic. And he had brought up the point that atheism has a natural level of diversity that isn't really present in a lot of religious circles. There isn't a whole lot of common ground aside from the lack of belief in God. So he made the argument that religiosity is better for social cohesion as opposed to a society that is predominantly atheist and therefore necessarily more diverse. I'm just curious if that fits at all into your calculus in this conceptualization of the video.
In terms of religiosity, define religiosity. Are we talking about, New Age spiritualism and believing in third eyes and chakras? Are we talking about religiosity in kind of the more amorphous sense of like sports is a religion because we all have our teams and we all gather together in one place every single week and raise our hands and chant? Religiosity is such a vague way of, it's such a vague definition that everyone I talk to, it's a little different. So I would like to kind of get that locked down, because there are studies that have found that like when you have a group that, gathers together around a shared interest or a common belief or something, that in and of itself can lead to greater cohesion. But the question is, what is the cohesion for? What is it driving you to do? What is it driving you to accomplish? Is it driving you to turn inward and focus on, personal development and the development of your soul? Or is it pushing you outward to have, scientific progress and development and to, test things empirically and make a society better? There's actually a significant amount of research done on the benefits of religion and potential aspects of it that can cause groups to, especially in the early days of humanity, to grow bigger than just these small, tiny little hunter-gatherer tribes, because now you're not just looking out for your family, you're looking out for your religious group, and that can cause more social cohesion and stuff. And there's additional potential benefits, but I think that what the research is showing now is that we're at a point where there's so many other things that we can form group joint interests around, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or whether it's sports or whether it's political interests or elements of activism, that we have these social groups popping up and we have people believing in things and coming together around things that we're passionate about. And that could be scientific progress. That could be reaching out and reaching into the stars and colonizing space. It could be anything. But I don't think that it has to be limited to religion. We have so many diverse interests and stuff that people can form groups around and communities around, and we find each other through the internet and we realize we're not alone and we come together and we build these groups. And I don't think that you have to have a belief in something that doesn't exist in order to have that.
Absolutely. Yep. There's really nothing that would be Yeah. Christian, hopefully that helps. Was there anything else that you wanted to ask or talk about before we moved on to the next call?
Not a whole lot. I guess I would just say I really enjoyed the video, and my example that I gave was, I have more in common with my heathenist, atheist D&D group than I did with anyone who I was ever in church with. So it's about the community with the people who you're around, not about the religiosity behind it. But thanks for taking my call. It's my first time calling in, so it was a pleasure.
Rock on. Well, thank you for calling, man. Take it easy.
You too.
That's nice. And I do love my D&D. Actually, half of my D&D group is in the chat right now.
I have never played Dungeons and Dragons, so the fact that this one call D&D has been brought up like 6 times is baffling.
That makes
but I'm part of it. I keep on,
Yeah, so my DM is actually in the chat, X-Cult Baby.
Yeah.
And my character is actually a paladin and is terrified of their god. But it's interesting. It is contextual. We do live in a universe that has these properties, and when we create these fictitious ones that have different properties, it's you can still view it through a skeptical lens. As long as you're using good tools, you'll still be able to come to reliable conclusions. So it's just that important. We do have a couple callers on the line, but we don't have as many as I'm comfortable with. If you want to call in, now's that time. Please, 512-991-9242.
Can I couch it too? Especially if any of you believe in anything paranormal, supernatural.
Yeah, that's your bag.
Like anything like that. I can't promise that it's a specific area I've dedicated a lot of research to, but stuff like psychics I've delved
Prophecy.
into, palm reading, tarot cards, astrology, prophecy.
Yeah, if you're a prophecy watcher, if you watch the show and you believe in prophecy, this is the guy that you want to call in and talk to.
Water divination. Yeah. Also, like, if you've ever experienced like the miraculous, faith healing, miracles, the power of prayer, demon possession, like, yeah, that's my bag. Not so much Bigfoot and like cryptozoology. I haven't really taken that avenue, but the rest of it, I'm here.
Rock on, man. I'm glad you are too. Let's move on and talk to Chris in California. Chris, you're live with Eric and Thomas. What would you like to talk about?
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call. Hey, maybe quickly, what my first subject was, I always called myself an agnostic, and I talked to your guy Jonathan, I guess, or John, and he helped me determine, I guess, that I'm a agnostic theist, apparently, and I said, okay, that's fine, but I'm not quite sure how it works. So, if we want to narrow down why I am, I don't know. It's about believing in God or not believing in God, I guess, or something like that, right?
Well, so if we were to kind of nail down definitions, I think that the Gnostic, agnostic part would, at least in the way that we talk about it, have to do with whether or not you have certainty, whether or not you feel like you have enough evidence at hand to get to there, or if you want to say, I don't know, I don't have all of the information. That's where that agnostic piece comes from. And I think Dawkins put it on a scale that we wouldn't be too far apart from. I think that for the most part, we're also agnostic atheists. We can get into those edge cases where that's not true, but for the purpose of this conversation, when you say that you're an agnostic theist, what I'm assuming you mean is that you believe in God and you don't think you have all of the evidence, but your natural tendency, where you go, the way you live your life, is as if a God exists.
Kind of, maybe. I'm not a classic religious God believer by any sense, and never have been. If I was, as my whatever you call it, epistemology, I guess, develops. Thanks a lot to you guys, and in the recent years. But anyway, I see sort of that maybe I'm kind of saying, yeah, that's probably an intelligent design. As far as a God or so on, maybe if you're Thomas, you're mentioning paranormal and supernatural, and maybe this spreads into that. If we're talking about what I would talk about as a spiritual realm and stuff happening, maybe that's what people call God. I don't know, but anyway, I kind of have a inkling that that's probably a thing going on, and I'd give it a 60% chance at least, or on a good day 75. So that's kind of where I am with that. If that exists anyway.
Do you have that do you approach everything that way? That if you think it might be the case or there's not enough evidence against it, that you kind of believe it? No, it has a lot to do with my perception and, gut feeling. Do you let your gut feelings rule other places in your life? Like your spending habits or the way you would raise children or treat a partner?
I have basic, what one might call morals behind all that stuff. I'm trying to understand your question. Raise children and what? Say it again.
Sure, no problem. So when you rely on that gut kind of feeling, that's not always backed up by evidence. Yes, your brain does a lot of calculations behind the scenes and helps you arrive at the most rational conclusion that you can. But if you were to say, I have a gut feeling, therefore it's true, you'd be going a step too far, right? If you're going to just make
I never do that. I never do that.
Okay. So do you think that your God belief might be?
What I think is true is what I. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say. So do you think that your God belief is actually in like its own little category that gets that treatment, but not everything else does?
No. It's very much like everything else in that respect, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, as far as what I think's going on when I don't know for sure, I might give it a % chance of something being true. And if I know 100%, I mean, I could narrow down what I know 100%, but I don't know if that's necessary now. But
I'd love to ask you a couple of questions.
I'm an agnostic, and I don't know.
Well, that is a fantastic place to start and really kind of admit, because admitting to yourself that you don't know gives you the permission to continue to explore. Can I ask you a couple of questions? It sounds like you're defining God, or are not defining God, in kind of nebulous enough ways that you can keep living in that I don't know place. So could I define a God that you would say that God doesn't exist?
I don't know, man. Try.
Okay. I believe that God is
a broccoli.
A what?
God is a giant piece of broccoli, and the world is floating on the back of the universe is floating on the back of the broccoli.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's in the Book of Eric. I don't know, but no, I wouldn't.
Absolutely not.
Like, do you believe in broccoli God? Like, I made it up 2 minutes ago. It could have been divine revelation.
I have 8 minutes. What is it?
So, I mean, I made it up 2 seconds ago, and it was divine revelation. It just popped into my head, and it was the broccoli God put that thought in my. I'm the prophet of the broccoli God. Do you believe me?
Oh, no. Well, I'm not going to say hell no, but no.
I actually think a hell no is warranted. You brought up the Book of Eric. The Book of Eric would say that I, Eric Murphy, am omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, omnipresent. Well, do you think that that is a true statement about the world, the universe that you live in?
That Eric is that? I don't know. Maybe he's working on it. I don't know.
But here's the thing.
Probably not. Yeah.
I think you're hiding, and I don't know, in places that I think that you should have some confidence in. There are some things that you can be pretty confident aren't there. So if you were to say omnipotent, just as a property, logically doesn't make sense. And so anything that is given the property of omnipotent, you can toss out. You don't have to say I don't know. You can just go no.
Okay. Omnipotence in itself is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm bringing up a property so that I can demonstrate to you that when you described this, you were saying that, well, some people define God as this and that, and so I'm agnostic. Where I kind of want to put you is I want to help ground you so that you can start making some.
I need that a lot. I need that a lot. Go ahead.
Awesome. So we live in a world that have certain immutable facts about it. Right. Mass has a very, very distinct interaction with matter. And that's why gravity is a thing. You can't say you don't believe in it. You're subject to it. Right. We live in a universe with some immutable facts. And so to say I don't know.
I agree, young Eric. Yes, I do.
Yes. So you can say I'm not agnostic about that. Right, and so
that is true. That
good.
I think that's true.
Now, let's go with your calling yourself a theist, because here's the thing: if you're calling yourself a theist, that means that there's a theism, a very specific set of beliefs that you are accepting as true. That's what the theist claim is. It actually doesn't have to do with other people. In fact, I think that most religious people have their own concept of God that they think is true. And so what I want to dive into is, it's not what Chris evaluates about other people. What makes Chris a theist? What do you accept as true about your God belief that you can convince us about?
Can we put the brakes on for a second, and I'll tell you something?
Yeah, what's up?
I never called myself a theist. Your call screener, in talking to me, determined that I'm a theist. And I
thought you were saying at the beginning of the call that.
So that's where I'm coming from. I'm happy to not call myself a theist if that brings up the confusion. You know.
I thought you were saying you were an agnostic theist. That recently a conversation made you realize that.
Yeah, we were operating under that impression. Regardless, I think that's an important point to bring up.
I actually never realized it. Excuse me, but I never realized it. So that was kind of the thing. You know, one of the other things, I don't know if we have time, but the love bombing interested me, and I don't know, paranormal, supernatural, but love bombing would be a brief thing to talk about if we can move on. I know you got other callers. And
yeah, we've got a good number of other callers, but Chris, dude, thank you for calling in. And I'm sorry that we misunderstood and we kind of talked past each other, but I really do think that there's value in that.
No, it was useful for people, I would hope, man. I mean, what the heck?
I agree.
You know, as far as the love bombing, just because, Thomas, I'll tell you, I love everybody unconditionally. So, a discussion.
Take that. All right, take it easy, man.
Right.
I did a whole video on that, the different kinds of love.
Mm-hmm.
I think that wanting to strive towards that maybe can be good, but I think that love is just so nebulous and can mean so many different things to so many people that I think that a whole lot of weird views can hide in there. And so
yeah, and it's one of those things where I feel like if someone says I love unconditionally, like our last caller did, what does that mean? Does that mean that if he is the victim of this horrible, torture and people killing his kids and things like that, he's still going to love them? Or just that he doesn't have a place for hate in his heart and he's not a hateful person and he can forgive? I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly, I think that the principle of charitable listening, just operating under the assumption that the person that you're talking to is honest and forthcoming in what they're saying, I think that's enough. I don't think you need to tie the word love into it. But hey, we can continue to build onto there. There's a caller who has called in about prophecy a number of times, much to the chagrin of a good number of viewers. But you are co-hosting, and I just want to see this.
Okay.
So this is for me. Kevin in New York, you're live with Eric and Thomas. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good. Hopefully you can hear me good. I was gonna wait to call back in, but what you guys said prompted me to call in.
Good. What did you want to talk to us about?
Well, first I'd like to say in terms of love, now I'm getting information from, of course, the Bible and apocryphal texts. But there is somewhere within apocryphal text where it says that I think it's a teaching of Jesus that says that there is a love that can be gained that covers the multitude of sins. There's a love that you can gain for people. It doesn't matter who it is.
Is that a prophecy, Kevin?
So that's
well, I'm happy to accept that. Is that what the main thing you want to talk about in this call, or were you wanting to go for prophecy and also kind of make that point?
Oh yeah, I'll go for prophecy. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make that quick comment.
Okay.
But for prophecy, for prophecy, in the book of Enoch. Now, I know
Book of
you guys
Enoch?
heard this a lot. Huh?
Oh, you said the Book of Enoch?
Yes.
Okay. So what is the Book of Enoch?
The Book of Enoch is only one book of many that are put in a section that is called the Apocrypha.
Okay, so so you're saying that this is a book that is excluded from the Bible? But was originally part?
That's only according to whatever denomination you're talking about.
We're talking to Kevin.
Yeah, no, it's what he's saying, and I'll just clarify real quick, is it depends on which religious denomination you're in. There's certain texts, like a lot of times we think that there's just one Bible, but a lot of times the books that are in, say, the NIV aren't necessarily the same as all of the books that are accepted by, certain Catholic denominations or something. And because there are lots of other books besides the ones that were written in the New Testament and the Old Testament that are considered apocryphal texts by most denominations, but they're still written around the same time period about a lot of the same characters or the same stories. And so it's like, is this divine or is it not? There's argumentation, but it's still, literature that exists.
Oh, yes, that's right. But I know you guys heard this a lot, but how you've heard from Old Testament that they talk about giants. Well, they also talk about it in apocryphal books. But this is the way that the prophecy kind of works out, because whether or not these giants really existed, we can then take the context of giants and know that it represents people who gain resources and wealth so vast that there's always an underclass, a permanent underclass. How it says that they took these people for advantage and then turned power.
Why do we need giants for that? Like that's kind of simple economics. Unless you have complete perfect redistribution, as long as you have incentive, which money in itself and power is an incentive in and of itself, you're always going to have some people that are going to, accumulate wealth faster. Some people are going to provide benefits and they're going to grow. Some people are going to exploit and they're going to grow. But that's, you don't even need Adam Smith for that.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you say that. But there are other things that tie to it, because as I guess in this context from this text, you can see these giants were probably representing the wealthy kings of the days who had slaves.
Okay, hold on. Can I pause here for just a second? So the claim is that there were giants, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the claim that you are trying to support and convince us of, correct? I don't want to straw man you, so I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so you brought something up that you felt was supportive of the claim that giants existed in the world. And Thomas responded. And so you are now trying to scooch that over into not actually talking about physical things about the world, but as a metaphor for other things. So are you now saying you no longer believe in giants or that giants ever existed?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, so I think that talking about metaphor is kind of a rabbit trail. Is there anything else that's supporting your belief in giants?
Unless you're saying that the fact that there were wealthy kings is proof that they were extremely tall.
Oh, yeah, I didn't. Does getting wealthy make you taller?
Or does being tall make you wealthy?
In a metaphorical sense, I guess they could be seen that way, because.
Is giantism necessary for? Because I will grant you 100% that there were great kings, that there were great rulers, that there were incredibly wealthy people, that there was income inequality, and that people dominated massive, set up empires and dominated massive sections of land. 100%. I will grant you all of that. But emperors is only proof of empires. It's not proof of giantism. And even, giantism, that's so amorphous, because there are people who, there's a trait called giantism where you can have, you can be born and grow really quickly and be really tall and have big bones. But are we talking about something beyond the threshold, the Guinness World Record, what was it, like 9 feet or 10 feet or something maximum? Or are we talking someone who's like 60 feet tall and, like Jack and the Beanstalk style?
And also the context that I'm bringing to it also has to do with the idea that angels existed and that angels mated with
the
humans.
Nephilim,
and that
supernatural,
and that's the kind of giant we're talking about. Is that the kind of giant you're talking about?
No, it's not. But this is working from the same tools and this is the context that it should be looked at, because the prophecy does go on to say on how that the result of all this happening, that these giants then began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and so on and so forth. Now, that's also should be looked at as there was a, because of the actions during those days, because of industrial, technological advancements, even from back then going on today, we result in killing off these animals. And that he says that
Kevin, don't you see you're going far and wide? You're no longer talking about the existence of giants. Now you're talking about what you think they did, when we're disagreeing with you from the outset that they ever existed in a way.
Well, and I still want to nail down what these giants are, because you start saying what they're going to do and what the prophecy is about and stuff. But I'm like, what are these giants? Is it just tall people? Because I had a friend who was 6'7", and and he's standing next to my friend who's 4 foot tall. He looks like an absolute giant, but he's still well within the realm of the natural world.
Yeah, Thomas is tall.
How would you define giants, and how is it unnatural or paranormal or outside of the ordinary of how tall people get?
Well, just as the Bible says, if you follow all of this in chronological order, these giants could not have, in a sense, really been giants at all.
You're talking
to... It referred to...
Oh, go ahead.
It referred to them in this way because these giants became the offspring of the devil, but it's talking about it in a spiritual sense.
Okay. So they're spiritual giants. How do we test this? How do we...
power, money, and status.
How do we test this? What is the claim that's being put forth? That there are wealthy people, and because there's wealthy people, it's proof of giants? Because
it's that's not fair to say, because there are wealthy people who, of course, do good things, but there are, of course, those wealthy people who only gain that wealth through the exploitation of others.
What does that have to do with being giant? See, here's the thing, Kevin. You're pointing at a book that we don't agree is true. We don't agree that the stories and the myths in there actually relate to the real world. And so when you point to them to say, here's my evidence, no. That's why we're asking you to actually engage in those concepts, because when you point back and go, well, if you follow the Bible, well, no shit.
Kevin, there's something that I see a lot of people do, because I have a whole series called Nothing Fails Like Bible History, where I go and I look at the big picture and I look at the claims being put forth by, religious people and people who believe in the Bible. And then I'll look at what the archaeology, or what archaeologists are saying, what the archaeological evidence points to. And I'll say, is there something that someone is missing? Someone has to be right. Someone has to be wrong, because there's conflicting claims. What does the evidence point to? And is there contradictory evidence that contradicts something? And a lot of times you'll see the creationists, they'll put forth something like, look, the Bible talks about Egypt. We know Egypt was a real place. The Bible talks about this Pharaoh. We know he was a real person. The Bible talks about this. Therefore, the Bible is true. And I'm like, okay, Spider-Man comics talk about New York. We know New York is a real place. It talks about, maybe, some of the Marvel comics might even mention Obama. We know he was a real person. Therefore, Marvel comics are true. No, it doesn't work that way, because you can have any form of myth or legend. Usually mythology is not connected to the real world really very much.
I do.
Legend usually stems from a real story and then has stuff added. And the fact is, you can have stories that are written down, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, talking about, all of these different gods and his quest for immortal, eternal life and stuff. And he can talk about real, actual places and real, actual kings and people. And Hammurabi himself could be a real dude, and it still doesn't make the stories about him true. So what you have to do is, instead of looking for all of the little pieces of evidence to try to confirm this supernatural crazy story that doesn't comport with the reality of how the world works, instead what you should do is look for, well, of all of the evidence that we have, what is the more likely assumption? What makes the fewest assumptions based off of the evidence that we have, and is there anything contradictory that this doesn't account for?
Just to tie in and clarify the very specific claims, each of them individually. Because if you try to do it as a whole, then you fall into exactly what Thomas described.
Yeah. And what's the more likely hypothesis? You're like, okay, here's a story based in legend that presumes that there's angels and demons and that they're mating with humans and like you said, with animals and all this stuff, this craziness going on that doesn't match anything that we observe in the current world. But then you're like, that also, talks about how there's going to be people who, exploit others and become incredibly wealthy. Well, we know that there's people who are incredibly wealthy, but there are other hypotheses. There are competing hypotheses. Another one would be just that it's the natural way of things. Some people are selfish. Some people are corrupt. Some people exploit others and rise to the top. And so if you have these two competing hypotheses, one is that there's all of these assumptions about angels and demons and the supernatural and unverified claims. And then there's this other one that's just naturally people do what people do, and some are good and some are bad. Which one of those is the more likely hypothesis?
I actually disagree with you here. I disagree with you.
Likely.
Hold on just a second, Kevin.
Likely.
Kevin?
One sec, Kev.
Hold on just a sec. I think that's a false dichotomy.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily one or the other, because what he's done is he's set it up. So either this is literally true, or it's also true, but talking about metaphor.
Okay.
Either way, it's carrying the assumption that what he's called about is true, and it just needs to be determined whether or not it's talking about real things in the world or metaphor. And I think that's a BS way to go about things.
No, there's not only two hypotheses. There's hundreds of hypotheses. The question is, which one actually makes the most sense, the fewest assumptions, and comports with the world around us?
Agreed. I'm just trying to look at the tactic that Kevin is bringing here. Kevin, are you making actual claims about the world, or are you trying to couch, metaphors here? Do you think that giants existed in the world? Yes or no?
Well, yes.
Okay. Are you talking about metaphorical giants or physical giants?
Well, I'm talking about both.
Okay, I don't care about both. I'm asking you about pick one. No. Let's just go with the physical one, because if you want to sit here and wax philosophical about metaphors, cool. But I really think that's a waste of time. Physical giants. Do you think that they existed in the world?
Yes.
Why?
No. Because I really do believe I'm coming about this logically. But
okay, so logically, show me why you think that physical giants existed in the world.
Well, first, I wanted to say the reason why you don't get this argument from a lot of Christians is because it is the most likely assumption that this rose about as
Kevin.
preferring some counts over others.
I don't care. I'm talking to you. I don't care about how special or unique you are from other Christians or from other believers or whatever. I want to know what you believe and why. So you made a claim about giants. So let's keep it on topic here and try and get away from the metaphor and get to the thing that you're saying that we actually disagree heavily on, and that is that giants existed in a way that is significant. Because if you're going to go into exactly what Thomas described of, there are some tall people sometimes, then quit wasting our time.
Yes.
right? Are you following this as a supernatural claim?
Well, yes, it is a supernatural claim, and the reason why I believe that is because the resulting of talking about these giants in the Bible is that first it's recognizing the style in which it was written, because it says that
perfect.
What these giants did, the earth had laid accusation against us, and that style of writing. To real life today things is saying that the earth is then becoming a less hospitable place for us.
Okay, so let's pause there. Let's pause there.
Yeah.
You're using the Bible to support your claim that physical giants existed, right? Yeah. Do you think we accept the Bible as an authority to be able to reliably come to conclusions like that?
No, I don't. But
so, do you see how that's kind of spinning your wheels a bit?
Calls that I stress in these calls that the reason why we don't have a comprehensive read of this is because a long time ago these denominations came about as a result of preferring some accounts over others, excluding some things for personal benefit for whoever thought that they had the authority to do so.
Okay, so fantastic. We have now moved away from giants again. And then when I said about the Bible, you're now talking about some accounts of the Bible. What is it about your claim that is backed up?
I understand why you guys don't believe in any validity of it.
Okay, why do you?
The validity is then returned if you add these apocryphal texts to the canon of the Old and New Testament.
Kevin, it sounds like what you're doing is you're starting with this assumption that the Bible is true, and because the Bible talks about literal giants, you're like, well, there must have been literal giants. Rather than starting with the claim of, is there any evidence of literal giants? No, there's not. Maybe that's a strike against the Bible. You're starting with this assumption of truth that is not how the scientific method operates. The scientific method starts with the assumption that, okay, we don't know. Let's form a hypothesis and test it. Let's try to disprove. Let's go through and try to poke all kinds of holes and see if it stands on its own merit. And the fact of the matter is that with all of these stories in the Bible, the flood myths, the Tower of Babel, talking donkeys and talking snakes, giants, like all of it, it's not grounded in reality. So you can hang on to it and be like, but the Bible is stylistically wonderful, therefore all these claims have to be true. Or you can look at it and be like, the Bible's making all of these crazy claims. Why am I assuming that the Bible's true to begin with? It might be stylistically beautiful. I will grant you that there are people who wrote aspects of parts of the Bible that were very poetic. There are proverbs that are very insightful. You can take that and you can appreciate that and understand that there's also poets who write incredibly beautiful things today that are stylistically wonderful. There are futurists who make claims about the future who happen to get it right. A lot get it wrong. Statistically, some get it right. But that doesn't mean that there's some kind of like divine inspiration or infallibility, that this assumption of infallibility it's not warranted.
And I just also want to, well, no, hold on. I'll give you that moment. Okay. I also want to dive in just a little bit here. When you called in last week, it was fantastic. And that I just want to stress, it's the approach that we're getting heated about, because it's just not a good approach. And we're trying to approach it from 500 different ways to try and show that approach does not get you to reliably, consistently, understanding things about the world. It's a flawed methodology.
Yeah. Well, another source of what I was beginning to talk about and why I think that Christianity is even the true religion amongst the thousands of other ones is because that's one of the huge reasons why the Book of Enoch was excluded from the Bible, because it then brings the understanding that because of this intervention of angels on earth a long time ago, that brought about the origins of all these other religions.
I hate to break it to you, but there were religions long before the oldest recorded copy of the Book of Enoch. Like there have been religions. There are people groups that we've found DNAs and bodies and remnants of paintings and stuff. Even the paintings in Lascaux in the caves in France are thousands of years older than the biblical texts. And I believe it's those caves. There's some cave paintings. It might not have been those, but there were others where if you go into archaeoacoustics and you start looking at the sound setup of the caves, they're perfectly placed to have this resonance where you have almost this spiritual like experience of the way that the sound comes back to you and echoes back to you, to where archaeologists look at that and they're like, this was basically like theater. Imagine someone standing there with these paintings on the wall and shadows and light coming in and acoustics and telling stories, and then there's early carvings of gods and goddesses and statues and stuff that date well back before the Bible. And so all of this notion that that's the origin of new religions and stuff, it's bullshit. I'm sorry, don't waste my time.
Well, using Egypt as an example, I mean, going back from what we know, the Egyptians and their religious ceremonies, it falls under a lot of obscurity, but they had so many gods that they had one for every single day. But then,
what does that have to do with the
it seems like the reason why,
I'm just wondering what that has to do with the topic at hand.
I mean, if anything, it just shows that people are really good at creating gods. So if anything, that's a strike against Yahweh, which has, Sumerian roots and Canaanite roots and stuff. It's like, yeah, people are great at creating gods.
With this,
yeah, go ahead.
Where I was going with this is that there's an apocryphal story where the reason why Egypt fell under is basically kind of a dead religion now is because the time that Jesus has spent in Egypt brought about the end of their religions, which was to worship a different god for all the 365 days of the year. And I mean, every day is a different god.
I don't even smoke. I haven't smoked in 10 years, and I kind of want to go out for a cigarette and just let you go. Go ahead, Thomas. You called at the right time, Kevin. Go for it.
I'm throwing a whole lot out there.
No, that's okay. This will probably be the last one we take before we move to the next.
There's
call,
so much I can bite off. I've spent quite a bit of time studying like ancient Egyptian history and their religious beliefs and stuff. But I don't really want to dive down that rabbit hole just yet. There's one point that I want to make that I think is important, kind of on a macro level, and that's that you're looking at an apocryphal text and you're desperately looking for any piece of evidence that seems to back it up. To put in there and be like, look, this confirms it, this proves it, this happened afterwards. And it's like, I don't think you realize just how many thousands of events are going on all around the world right now. And you can look at Nostradamus predicting things. You can look at psychics predicting things. The psychic twins, they'll throw out like 1,000 different predictions. And then people come along years later and they're like, oh, wow, this one kind of fits that one. And it's like, yeah, when you shotgun out millions of different predictions and there's billions of different events going on over the course of thousands of years, you're going to get some hits. But you can't cherry pick out those hits and be like, well, this was this. Oh, they said this. That part,
metaphor.
That must have been metaphor referring to Hitler, and this part must have been referring to America. No, that doesn't fit. It must have been England. You can do that with anything. And, you can point to books and pieces of literature, like Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. And you can say that, well, this is so beautifully stylistically written. And I would argue written more stylistically than the Bible, because there's elements that the different bards and scribes and stuff would, well, not scribes because it was initially sung and then it was written down, but that there were certain stylistic elements that like every time that you referred to this god, you would say it like this. And there were certain, rhyming mechanisms and, different ways that they would write it. That was very beautiful and stylistic and artistic. That doesn't mean that these stories are true. They're based in real places. They refer to, Greece and Athens and stuff. That doesn't mean that they're true. The same with Aesop's fables. It doesn't mean that there was a tortoise and a hare just because, you have these myths and these legends that, oh, so-and-so, we've got the story of, what's his name, giving fire to the people,
Prometheus.
Prometheus. And it's like, well, we have fire, so therefore Prometheus must have been a real person. All these gods are true because look, we have fire. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Like, humans for millennia have come up with explanations post hoc, after the fact, to try to explain why things are the way they are. You can't then look and be like, look, things are the way that they are. It must have been that explanation. That's not how you do good research.
Let me say this real quick. It was a really, really interesting conversation. I'm taking notes, and
cool.
it was really interesting, but I have to go now. I apologize.
No problem. Take it easy, man. Thank you for calling in.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Kevin.
Well, if you're saying the Bible isn't beautiful, you obviously haven't read Psalms.
No, Song of Solomon.
Doesn't that one talk about big horses?
That verse isn't Ezekiel.
Oh, okay.
But the one Song of Solomon is the love poem by Solomon, where he talks about his lover's breasts being like two supple mountains.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Bible can be a very beautiful book. No, and I'm not gonna like that. That seems like just a dismissal. Like there are passages and there are Psalms and Proverbs and different parts that are written in a beautiful and stylistic way. That doesn't mean that the legends are true.
Agreed.
They might be based in an initial person or initial story. There might be elements of truth to them. They're not pure myth, not all of it, but it doesn't account for what actually happened the way it actually happened.
Agreed.
For that, we have to turn to archaeology. We have to turn to science. We have to turn to geology. We have to actually look at what all of the remaining evidence and the remnants and the pieces of this. It's like a crime scene investigation. You come in after the fact and you're like, all right, we got fingerprints, we got DNA, we got this. But then there's this legend written about how, the murderer was actually Genghis Khan and he came back from the dead.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it just makes me think of Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. Maybe given enough time, people
that will become
because Abraham Lincoln obviously existed, therefore he hunted vampires.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
I, for one, welcome our new vampire overlords.
All right. Actually, you know what? Why don't we thank our top patrons? We do have a couple good callers on the line. I'd love to see a few more theist callers, but let's thank our top 5 patrons. If you want to support us, consider going to patreon.com/talkheathen-to-me. That's patreon.com/talkheathen-to-me, and you can be one of our top 5 patrons. Our top 5 patrons this week are Eric Tweet, Desert Heathen, Bethany P, Jay Friedman, and Ward Knippling. Thank you.
And I'm going to read off the 6th one. Dingleberry, the name's cut off at the very end, but I like the fact that it's Dingleberry.
It's Dingleberry Jackson.
Oh, Dingleberry Jackson.
Yeah. Is it you? Are you the Dingleberry?
No, I'm not.
I know you. You are a Dingleberry.
I'm joking because my series Animated Bible Myths had a god creature named Dingleberry. And so,
okay. I'm glad this is an adult show. All right, Sven, in Washington, you're live with Eric and Thomas. What would you like to talk about today?
Good evening. I thought a call earlier, you had mistaken that somebody said they were an agnostic theist, and that is definitely what I define as. And I found it interesting that towards the end you were going towards, what in our belief can we say that convinces you? But when someone has a personal God, it's because verificationism isn't convincing to us of why the soul or morals or whatever the metaphysical quandary that we're having in our psychology. And so I just don't know, I don't think anybody with their own spiritual belief in a individual God is trying to convince anybody, because we're not using verificationism or the scientific method to ground our beliefs in the supernatural.
What are you using, and why do you think it's a good methodology?
I think it's a good methodology because not having morality, not being an objective thing, does not sit well with my psychology and spirals me down like moral relativism. Just like studying it drives me to depression and nihilism.
Are there any other uncomfortable truths that you deny simply because they're uncomfortable?
Nothing else drives me towards depression that I would need to.
Well,
verificationism.
So you know what's interesting is I've got a good amount of family in Germany, and as a child, I think the very first time that I went to Germany as a kid, it was not long after the wall came down, and just moving over into East Germany felt like the color got sucked out of the world, and learning as a child about the Holocaust, was something that was really, really heavy and very, very personal and upfront, because I'd seen a lot of, and been taken to a lot of those places. But to say it makes me incredibly depressed to think of and recognize that, there was an attempted genocide. I don't think I could possibly say, well, then it didn't happen. I know that some people might.
But you could say that a wicked power caused it and not just a single human.
I don't know how that applies, though. We're in talking about the methodology. You said that you are sticking to the idea that morality is objective because the contrary makes you feel uncomfortable. So I think I'm giving an example of somebody saying,
logical sense to me.
"Oh, okay, well, that's different. That's actually that's different." Something. So we can talk about logical sense, but it making me uncomfortable. The example I was going to say is, Holocaust sounds really, really bad, makes me depressed. Therefore, the Holocaust didn't happen, which is obviously a horrible. But it's just applying that kind of methodology. So, what doesn't make logical sense about, walk us through? How did you get there?
I would just say no logic, including verificationism or epistemology or skepticism, has convinced me that there's no morality, that not owning slaves or that genocide are just subjective truth to somebody.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't.
Not really.
Doesn't add up to me that saving 100 people is just as morally correct as committing genocide, if moral is relative to the people. Then a tribe is able to. I understand that we deal with subjective morality in the universe that we have now, but there is just something that even humanists follow that leads us towards labeling well-being as the logical sense of, that's what makes the most moral sense to humanists, is to value well-being. There's no science that says well-being is the foundation of morality.
Well, agreed, and that's because morality is something that we are creating, right? It's something that we are deciding upon together. So can I zoom out just a little bit, because I think zooming out might help. What makes a thing objective? Like, let's say you're absolutely right, and morality is objective. What makes it objective? Like, what is it? A God content? Like, what is it that makes something objective?
This is where we're not going to be able to see eye to eye, because this is where I don't see verificationism coming in handy to say what makes morality objective, because that would.
By definition, how would you define it?
Yeah.
Like we're not asking for verification right now. We're just asking for a definition.
Define objective morality.
Yeah.
I would define it as any action taken that improves one soul and the collective consciousness soul as a whole, improving that.
So, isn't that still subjective? You're subjectively.
Like I said, in this world, we're saying we deal with subjectiveness because it is our personal thing.
Okay.
And that's why
it sounds like he defined utilitarianism, though. He's like, it increases the. What was it? How did you word it? The well-being of our soul, or something like that?
Of the collective.
Or collective soul.
And the collective consciousness. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it sounds like you're creating a moral framework very similar to utilitarianism, where it's basically it's very consequentialist. All right, this action improved our collective soul well-being. This action didn't, therefore this one's moral. Well, you can have a similar moral framework that is purely based off of utility and end results. Is it the best one? You could argue for and against it, but it sounds really similar, and I'm not really sure how that's different from other moral frameworks that have been put forth throughout history.
Oh, I would agree with you. Most people you will find will align with utilitarianism. It just doesn't feel like, it doesn't seem like that is a...
It still feels subjective to me.
Right, it is subjective because we are humans and we all have our own beliefs.
Okay, but you said you don't believe in subjective morality.
Spiritual.
So
Pure. What pure morality is, I believe, is objective.
Okay, so pure morality is objective. That's where you're going with this. I'm trying to follow because it feels real fuzzy here, and I'm trying to pin down so that I can understand what you're saying. I want to understand you here, man. What is objective? And how is it objective? Why is it objective?
It would, I guess, objective because it's.
Hello?
No, you have me stumped. I'm trying to think. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Actually, that is an incredibly honest response. What I would say is you need to give yourself credit that we as a species have created these objectives because we're geared towards survival. And because of that, because we're a social species that's geared towards survival, those objectives that we create are going to line up with them. And I think that's just an observation of what we see. And so while I'm bringing out a causal link, or not a causal, a correlation, I think that's a good framework. I mean, understanding that something is subjective may feel uncomfortable, but I don't know how we can get anywhere else. Like, let's say you were to convince us that a God existed and God wanted us all to stand on our left foot and dance, hop around for a little bit, right? Just because you could convince us of that, right? And you were to say, objectively, everybody should be hopping on their left foot. Well, isn't that just God's subjective decision? Right? If God tells you to do something, then all you did is you just backed it up a step, and now it's God's subjective decision. I don't know where that objective can actually exist.
That's why I said I'm an agnostic theist, because I don't believe anybody can claim to know that one God exists that these moralities
Okay, then
it's not a God that set them. It's a collective thing. It's morality is part of the collective consciousness of souls that we are trying to improve.
Why do you need consciousness, though, for morality to exist? And in a sense that, I'm backing away from. I hate the way that I worded that just now, because my mind is going a million different ways, and a lot of times, like what I hear put forth is an argument for morality that it has to be objective. That if it's just subject to our every whim, it can come and go, and we can believe in whatever. So we need to have God make it objective. Well, but then what makes it objective if it's God's, dictate? Isn't it subjective to God's, ideas and stuff? And they're like, well, but God is good. It's a part of the fabric of the universe. It's built in and it's unchangeable like math. Okay, well, if it's built into the fabric of the universe, then why does it have to be conscious if it's just all around us? If it's, and I might even go so far as to say that it's not built into the universe, but if we're going to survive, there are certain natural selective pressures towards moral societies or towards societies that don't just cannibalize their own and don't just kill their own, because the ones that do get wiped out and slaughtered. So is that objective? It's not written by anyone. It's not subject to our whims, but it's just a natural pull that's kind of a part of the universe, but it doesn't require consciousness. It doesn't require God for these pressures to exist.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say when you said that morality is part of the collective consciousness. And in a way, it's like, yeah, all of us together, like we form these moral frameworks that some work better than others and some don't work at all. So in that way, it's like, yeah, it is that morality requires our conscious contributions. But
I have such weird baggage with the word collective consciousness because I tried to really, I really thought that everybody was psychically linked. But
yeah, when I hear that, I think of like, oh, it's in the Akashic records and it's this consciousness that we all tap into. And it's, I don't like it for that reason. But in terms of all of the things that we know individually, putting our ideas together.
Yeah. But if that is something that you believe, I'd love for you to call in another time because that's a really fun conversation to have.
Oh, definitely. And I don't want to take up too much time. We're going towards the end of the show, but I just want to say, like, it is a matter of, like, verificationism will not lead spiritual people away from their spiritual beliefs. That's why street epistemology, it always ends to, this is just how I feel, because the feeling is not going to be overridden by verificationism for large parts of humanity.
I want to pick at that because I want to find out more about that. But unfortunately, this is not the venue, especially with as much time as we've had on the call. What I do suggest, though, is check out, I did a 3-part discussion with Dr. Randall Rouser on objective morality. And that might be worth taking a look at, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
Where can people find that?
Thank you so much. Always enjoying the show.
What's your channel called?
It's YouTube. Just look for Eric D. Murphy on YouTube.
Okay.
All right, bye. All righty. So let's move on. Ooh, there's someone in Lebanon calling. Dayana in Lebanon, you're live with Eric and Thomas. What would you like to talk about?
Hi, how are you?
Hi. We're doing well. What did you want to talk about?
Well, I'm an atheist, skeptic atheist, but I've always struggled with psychic abilities because I used to experience, and I still have experiences. Sorry, English is my second language, so bear with me. Well, like when I was in my high school or middle school, I used to dream my exam, like to the letter. I just dream my whole exams. I was an A student, and I don't know why. I used to go lots of places for the first time and know every single detail before it happened. Yet, I don't believe in supernatural. I don't believe in psychic powers, but it happens to me, and I can't shake it off. And the ghosts and everything else. I don't believe in them, but I'm still afraid from darkness sometimes, which is weird. I need your feedback about that. Yes. Sorry, it's too much.
Yeah, so I've actually, this is an area that's really interested me because I also have had experiences that I thought were supernatural and I was convinced were supernatural. And then I investigated further and I figured out what was happening. And I think it's important to understand that our brains are really, really, really good at deceiving us. And I'll give you a few examples. First, our eyes, we only see a tiny little spectrum of all of the light that's coming in. We don't see the infrared, we don't see the ultraviolet, we see a tiny little bit. Then our eyes take the light in and we perceive it upside down and our brain flips it. There's where the optic nerve is, there's a little blind spot where this nerve connects your brain to your eyeballs. And so it's just guessing what's there. And the same with how you only see a little small, narrow sliver of the visible spectrum. You only hear a very small sliver of audio frequencies, but your body can still kind of detect some of the others that are out there through, vibrations in your bones and things like that. It can make you really uneasy. So if you go into a room and there's a certain frequency of sound that is natural and you're feeling it, your body can have like your hair stand on end and you start freaking out and feeling paranoid because you think that something's wrong. And there may have been, an evolutionary reason for us to have, responded this way because certain natural disasters also trigger, kind of these low frequency vibrations and tremors. And so there's little elements that things cause us to be uneasy. Even something as very simple and common that happens to all of us, like not sleeping enough, sleep deprivation can cause us to have hallucinations. It even happens in group settings. There's a book I was reading called SEAL Team 6, where some of the most elite fighters in the world, Navy SEALs, they went a whole week in Hell Week with no sleep. And then they all collectively, they're in this boat and one of them yells sea monster and they start smashing this net with their rope thinking it's a sea monster and it's just a net, but they're all collectively, they're subjected to this power of being influenced by other people and this insinuation that something is what it isn't, and they hallucinate together. And so there's all of these things that like our brain is really, really good at seeing things that aren't there, seeing a pattern and thinking it's a face. There's a word called pareidolia, where we think that we see faces where there's just patterns. We see a pile of laundry in the corner that looks like a shadow and it looks like a ghost, and then we get up and we turn the lights on and it's just a pile of laundry. Or while we're sleeping, we can experience sleep paralysis, and it's just our brain naturally shutting down our muscles so we don't thrash in our sleep. But then when we wake up, we're not fully awake and our muscles are still paralyzed and our body starts freaking out emotionally and it feels pressure and we start hallucinating and thinking that there's ghosts and demons in the room, but it's all up in our head. And it's not that we're crazy. It's not that we're, on drugs. It's just that our brains are like, we don't understand everything. Most people don't understand everything that's attributed oftentimes to the supernatural, but just because we don't know everything that our brains do doesn't mean that someone doesn't know or that there isn't a natural explanation that's out there to be found. I know that was a lot. That was...
Okay. No, it's okay. It was great. First, what's the name of the book that you read?
Well, the book, it was only one tiny part of the book, but I read a book called SEAL Team 6, and it was about Navy SEALs, about soldiers that were training.
Okay.
And the whole book is just about their training, but there was one really tiny part in the book where they talk about this collective hallucination that they had.
And
Tell me about one thing, is that, the sleep paralysis, because I do have that.
Yeah.
I do sometimes feel like something is touching me and I try to wake up. I'm awoke, but I can't move myself. So thank you for this explanation.
Yeah, really I did a whole video on my channel where I break down the science of it. If you go to Holy Kool-Aid on YouTube, go to youtube.com/Holy Kool-Aid.
Actually, I watch you. I didn't watch this, but I will watch it.
Look for my video on sleep paralysis. I go a lot more in detail on that.
And
thank you very much.
Dayana, one last thing, a little bit more homework, and that is that I think, would you agree with me that there are people who see things and hear voices and are not experiencing something supernatural, but are instead suffering from some kind of just disability? Right?
Yes.
People. So how do you tell the difference between? So how do you?
Sorry, Eric.
No, that's okay.
Supernatural. I don't believe in supernatural.
No, so. But here's the thing.
It's not logical to me.
Understood.
I still have these feelings.
Understood.
That's normal. That's normal.
Where I'm going with this is, how do you tell the difference between yourself and others who think they're experiencing what you're experiencing, but actually aren't? Like, what are those distinguishing things? Because that can help you kind of explore that and really kind of set those apart. I think that trying to find what the difference is, it'll help.
Mm.
How am I different from the people who are wrong? And then, go that way. But anyway.
And I want to make a really strong point that it's not just, it can be that people have a form of mental illness, and it can be something like multiple personality disorder. I think now it's called something else, but you could be having these hallucinations because of mental illness or something, but it's not necessarily, like, very, very common. Purely, like, you can be completely healthy and you could have a focal point seizure that you're not even aware of, or you could have different things that happen to your brain that are natural, that happen to people all the time, that
Yeah, but thank you for calling in, Dayana.
Thank you. You helped a lot.
Yeah,
good.
Have a nice day.
You too.
You too. All right, let's move on. Let's talk to Kelly in California. Kelly, You're live with Eric and Thomas. What would you like to talk about today?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Doing well. I'm excited about your topic. It says you want to talk about logic as a construct. Dude, that's my jammy jams.
Yeah.
I might let you take over this one.
It's so much fun. Okay, hit me. What do you want? What do you want to talk about?
Real quick, I have to say thanks to the community of Austin, the atheist community of Austin, for the shows you guys do. It's changed my life. Eric, I saw you on the Atheist Experience, brought me over to Talk Heathen, so just had to get that quick thank you in there.
Aw, it gives me warm fuzzies. Yay. All right, what'd you want?
So I have this talk a lot on my show, actually, debating people, and it comes from both theists and atheists. And they say, well, how can we know the epistemology of epistemology? What is the founding roots that let us know, almost in a solipsistic way, that we can be certain of our logic?
I think you're misapplying that. So let me try and make a distinction here, right? Your epistemology is how you come to know the things that you know, right? Your epistemology could be bad. You could use a lot of different reasoning that's fallacious. You can believe in what some people have called in today about things like prophecy and all of that. Those are your that's your epistemology. Now, ontology is not about what you're thinking or how you're getting there, but ontology is about what is. And so most of the time when we're using our epistemology, we're using it to make, determinations about ontological claims. And so if you want to make an ontological claim about epistemology, I think that might be a category error. Now we can do our best to weed things out and come up with the best, most reliable tools we can to learn about the world around us. But what kind of ontological claims could you make about epistemology?
Well, yeah, that's kind of the conundrum I face, because you can see where this seems so deeply unsatisfying to both theists and atheists when they talk to me about this, and I'm looking for the right answer.
Sure.
Because it unsettles them in a way that makes them more appreciative of religious claims than they should be, if that makes sense.
It is, and I think that it's something that a lot of people, a lot of religious people have kind of really dogpiled onto. And essentially, we have a set of assumptions, and we're granting each other those assumptions to move forward. And those assumptions are the laws of logic. Right? A thing is what it is, isn't what it isn't, and can't be what it is and it isn't at the same time. You have to assume that to move forward. And there's a conundrum in that, because you can't use it to prove itself. That reasoning is circular. And so I agree that in that way, yeah, that is super unsatisfying. Where I see it being exploited, though, is where people go, okay, you have this set of assumptions, I have this set of assumptions, so I'm just assuming God, so I'm just as right. Well, no, because we grant each other those assumptions. I'm granting you the laws of logic so we can move forward in this conversation. You're granting that to me, and because we're assuming that the other person is an honest interlocutor. And so in that way, we can move forward. But you only get as much as I grant you, right? Otherwise, I'm having a conversation by myself. Right. And that's where I think that things like the transcendental argument for the existence of God fail, because somebody who calls in or wants to talk to me about tag, they go, I'm not going to grant you logic. And so I'm just going to come over here, do my little dance, and it has nothing to do with you. Right.
But they're trying to do that dance on the premise that logic works.
Exactly.
Logically.
But and so essentially what we need to do is we have to start there. But I don't think we have to go any further, because you're limited to what you're granting that other person. And I think that in order to honestly have a conversation, you have to grant the laws of logic. I bet you we lost a ton of viewers, but I love this so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably why I don't have many myself, but it's an issue because there's this appeal to our ignorance that becomes so compelling. And I really want to head it off at the pass, because we end up in this place of a semantic black hole, I think. And there's got to be a way to put this and to get this across without asking for a favor of being granted something, I think.
So here's what we do. I think that what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're setting goals that we can achieve. Right? I don't make 100% claims about anything. What I do is I assign a degree of confidence to something. And that degree of confidence is entirely related to the evidence there is for it. Right? So if you're asking for 100% certainty in something, I think that you're setting yourself up for failure, even if it is that framework. Instead, what we do is we look at logic and we go, hey, every time we've used logic up until this point, it has worked. I have a high degree of confidence that logic works. And if it doesn't, then I will lower that confidence. But until such time, I'm going to treat it like I do everything else.
It's like, that's incredibly unsatisfying from a philosophical standpoint, because what happened in the past isn't necessarily an indicator of the future. But from a scientific standpoint, where, we've measured all of not all of the, but we've measured so many different aspects of the world around us, and we've, developed these laws that talk about the way that the world works, and they're consistent and they happen every single time, to the point where we can make predictions accurately and reliably that come to pass. From a scientific standpoint, you can look at that and be like, look, this is how the world is. This is how we've tested and, knocked on the world and beaten on the world and measured the world. And it always comes out this way. So therefore, we can use this to make predictions about the future. From a philosophical standpoint, that's unsatisfying. We could all be living in a vat, or it could be like the only reason that the laws of physics apply is because every single moment God is choosing to let them continue to apply. And next time he could choose to make them operate a different way. You could say that.
I feel like I want to put in subtitles as you were saying that. Hard solipsism, ding.
Yeah.
Ontological argument, ding. These are just.
But I understand how, from a philosophical standpoint, you could like, and I had this whole long argument with Cosmic Skeptic about it, where I'm coming from an empirical evidence standpoint. He's coming from a hard philosophical standpoint, and he's like, logically, it does not follow that because you tested something and it worked, 10 times in a row, that the 11th time it's going to be the same way. And I'm like, yeah, logically, you're 100% right. You can't say with any kind of certainty what's going to happen. But from a scientific standpoint, it works. It's practical. It's worked every single time, and it's the best we've got. So, like, do you need absolute certainty to come to truths about the world? Well, that's a whole nother philosophical can of worms to open. But
yeah, I think the only thing that I would amend to what you said is that you can operate with a high degree of confidence based on what you've observed up until that point. And so you can and you should operate with those. And you're right, it just doesn't get.
Well, we do because we don't have any choice. Because it's all that.
Have you watched this show?
It's all that we know works. Like if I right now, if you were to put your money where your mouth is and say, Oh,
I'm not saying I'm that way, but have you seen the callers?
It's like, all right, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna jump out the window because I assume that with the same amount of certainty that gravity may or may not work.
I've used that example. This is correct. That is just not true everywhere, and that's why the show's important.
Yeah.
But Kelly, I'm sorry to say that the blue balls that you're getting from having that piece, yeah, it's shared, man. I'm sorry, but that's just kind of the universe we live in. It's not a satisfying one.
It's not, but I think that we can inspire confidence in confidence. And that example you gave, this appeal to pragmatism, I guess that's another ding, but it can be paralleled to the appeal to pragmatism in religion too, where people will say, well, it's useful, and that's why we would do it, because if you are seconds from death, what would you do? Of course, you'll say a prayer and hedge your bets, and that means that you're confident in it in some way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, but it's not just an appeal to pragmatism. I think that in the world of science, I can make predictions about the future based off of everything I've observed, and so far that's always worked. So from a pragmatic standpoint, yeah, it is an appeal to pragmatism. But at the same time, I can make claims about the past that are, you know, I can look at not about the past, but in the present, I can look at the molecular composition of this table, and I can make statements about it that are empirical and that are factual. And I can say, you know, that, you know, this type of atom has, you know, this many protons and this many neutrons and this many electrons and stuff. So we're making statements based off of empirical observations, based off of data that we're gathering, that then we can also try to see, like, how does it operate and stuff. And it's like, it's not just pragmatism. Like, there is an evidence-based, empirical-based approach that, I don't know. I don't think it's purely. It's not just, hey, this seems to work. Religion seems to work. Therefore, religion has the same truth value as scientific claims. Because there's a lot of things about religion, even pragmatism aside, because you could argue that there's elements that aren't.
We are going to have a conversation after this show that is just going to be terrible.
Oof.
And I'm so sorry. But it's going to happen. I actually think we might be able to take it to the Discord, depending on how long I can torture you for. But Kelly, thank you for calling in. We appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the Discord. We're going to hop in there after the show.
Definitely. Thanks for the time, guys.
Absolutely. Take care, brother.
I definitely, like, whenever I hear stuff like that, I start to kind of think out loud. And
I know, I'm your roommate.
And I don't know if I'm necessarily right, which sucks, because with my show, I can edit and I can research and I can fact check. You can't do that here, so props.
Dude, have you seen the Moon episode? I've screwed up so many times. The important thing is that you recognize it and you say, hey, you know what? I was wrong, and I care more about admitting when I'm wrong and actually pointing towards truth than my own ego. As long as you can do that, you're fine.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that what you bring to the table is fantastic, and live or not, edited or not, I see incredible value in you. And
thank you.
I'm glad you're here. But before we move on, with that, I want to kind of ride that and go, how can people follow you? Where can people see your stuff? Can we plug your stuff just a little bit?
Yeah. So if you go on YouTube, you're already on YouTube. If you type in Holy Kool-Aid, bam, channel pops up. That's me. Should be the first result. I'm also on Twitter at Holy Kool-Aid if you want to interact with me. I'm on Facebook /Holy Kool-Aid, YouTube /Holy Kool-Aid. I have a Facebook group called Science Loving Skeptics, and then there's a Holy Kool-Aid Discord as well. But my Discord is tiny by comparison to the rest of it. But you can find all my stuff on my website, holykoolaid.com.
I sincerely appreciate what you do, man. And even if we weren't roommates, that I want to support you. And I think that this channel should be supporting content creators who are doing good work. And we need to keep doing that. I know that. Anyway, that's a whole rabbit trail.
Well, I appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
I mean, the biggest way people can support me is by, going on Tumblr and Pinterest. And no, I'm kidding. Because everyone knows that's where
or
you
subscribing to his OnlyFans. Okay. There are other people that we sincerely appreciate, and that is our crew. Can we just go and take a peek at our crew? Because y'all are amazing. We love you. Vern, you go for the crew kitty all the time, but we love you too. Yeah, no, we love the crew kitty, but we love you too, Lord of the Levels. All of you, we would not be able to do this without you. I mean, Thomas, when we hopped in setting up, they were already here.
Yeah.
And when we're done, they're going to be clipping it, creating thumbnails, putting it up as a podcast, making sure the audio is fantastic. The work that they put in is huge, and they're volunteers. They're not getting, none of us are getting paid for this, but we see value in what we're doing. So that's why we keep doing it. It's that support that just drives this, and it's something I love.
So real quick, a lot of times people who watch, only a small percentage of them are actually subscribed. So if you appreciate the hard work that the crew does, and you appreciate the show, and you appreciate Eric as well, then hit that subscribe button and the little bell thing so you can get notified each week when the show goes live.
I never remember to say that.
Well,
please subscribe.
And hitting the like button also helps with the algorithm. It helps YouTube to put it out there and more people see it. So
we
like, comment.
We hit a slowdown and we are like cruising toward 100,000 subscribers. Please help us get to 100 subscribers.
Get silver,
subscribers.
YouTube silver status.
I would love that so much. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Let's throw up some of those love rings. Are you ready? Do you remember how to do it?
Yeah. 1,
2, 3.
Also, I don't actually have an OnlyFans, so that'll save some people some Google time.
I've seen his OnlyFans.
Sorry for the disappointment.
It's true. I've seen it. He doesn't know it's there, but I never mind.
It's like Medusa. Is it Medusa that if they see it, they'll go blind? There's Medusa, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty. So whether you believe or not, if you're out there and you're putting yourself in danger during these times, COVID is rough. And if you're doing it from working in hospitals to stocking grocery shelves, we appreciate you. Take care of yourselves. Please be safe. You're doing your job. We're going to do ours. For those of you who don't believe, hey, everybody's got their own place. And sure, you saw me geek out about logic, but that doesn't mean that's where we all are. We have other passions, things like what Thomas does, which is incredibly important.
My OnlyFans? I'm kidding. I knew I could throw you off your groove
No. I'm making your OnlyFans tonight.
Oh, no.
I've got
it's just going to be a poorly photoshopped.
Oh, no. I don't have to Photoshop. I have so many embarrassing pictures of you. It's fantastic.
But none of them are naked. Well, I guess you could still. Yeah, fine.
Come and join us. We're building. We're expanding this community, and we're just glad that you're here. Do you remember how we end it?
Yeah, something like "We don't hate you."
Yeah. So for those of you who do believe, we don't hate you.
We just think you're wrong.
See you next week.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.